All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a stellar podcast today. Me and the guest were actually sitting and talking for about 40 minutes before we even starting, so I'm super excited. Right before I get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Tyler Koronich. Tyler James Koronich, right? We share a little bit of a name there. For the people that don't know you, man, this is how I kind of start all my podcasts. I want to take it all the way back. I don't want to know about the man that sits here today. I want to start as like the young man, who you were, what you thought life was going to be like, defining moments that shaped you. Were you born and raised here in Michigan? Let's start all the way back and we'll start to build your story.
Yeah, we got it, man. So much love and gratitude for having me. Appreciate it. Young Tyler. I mean, I grew up in Howell, Michigan, inside of a trailer park, kind of humble beginnings for sure. Always a heavy set kid, typical sports, stuff like that. Try to stay social growing up. And, from elementary kind of shifting into middle school, it was all music. I went down the deep end with playing music in bands and started playing it with the band in like sixth grade. So all middle school to, high school was just playing rock, playing music. And, after high school,
wait.
look back,
we got way too much to look into here.
Quick.
You're going too quick. So what was it about music that sparked passion? Because I could tell, and I know a little bit of your background story, there was a lot of passion there. And it was probably a moment where you got to be yourself. You got to be in the light. Like you started to create a little bit of an identity. What was it about music that drew you in?
Yeah, I think to be completely transparent, we'll just dive right into it, is I think I found, I had some, tough relationship with my father. He was an alcoholic, spent a lot of time in jail. Whether he was in the house, he was in the back room reading the whole time, not really there. And I think just like a lot of compounding effects looking back, really just validation, man. I grew up in church, like 3 times a week in church. And, playing music and the drums is something that kind of the youth group kids did, right? So I think it was me finding my place when it came to learning instruments, trying to be like one of the cool kids in that scene. And then it just turned into validation where I felt like I was getting decent at music. We started playing shows, we started playing with the band and that type of thing. And the attention that organically comes with that, whether I thought I was seeking that or not, it definitely fulfilled like a validation line, right?
So you start feeling a little bit of value. You start being like, even though my home life might be this, or I might have this father, I might have these questions that are not answered, you start to feel value. Were you in other sports or other athletics, or was that really your avenue and your focus of growing up? And about how old were you when you started music?
Yeah, good question, man. I think up through like elementary school, up until like 6th or 7th grade, I was playing all the sports with the kids in the neighborhood, whether it's baseball, football. Those are probably the 2 main. We played a little bit of basketball, but pretty much right when I got into middle school, I lost interest in that and pretty much dove deep into playing guitar, drums, bands, and stuff like that in that scene.
So who are your major influences before we skip past the music chapter? Because man, I tell you what, back in the day, we didn't have all the entertainment we have now.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so much entertainment now that like there's a million things. But back in the day, there was music could speak to you. You felt it. It was a little bit different because it wasn't, maybe we weren't so overindulgent. What were like the influential people to you?
Yeah, I mean, I used to get this question like often when I was still playing, and people will automatically wait for an answer like some old rock or rock and roll and that kind of thing. I grew up, we got in the car, very faith-driven household, kind of an eccentric church. So when we got in the car, we were listening to praise and worship and that kind of stuff. I get some secular music here or there just from like TV and stuff like that. But, early on it was like Christian-esque punk bands like Reliant K and stuff like that I, caught my interest up front as far as playing music goes, like pop punk and stuff. But
no, I appreciate the authenticity of the answer. You didn't just give me like, Zeppelin and this and Metallica. Yeah. No, you're talking about these are the actual people that were influential to me. So were there any moments when you were in music, like did you ever tour with the band? Did you play locally in shows that you really felt like, man, I'm noticed, I'm the singer here? And did that start to shape the Tyler that was going to be exiting high school into the world? Like I'm trying to picture who you were as you're transitioning out of high school, and that probably played a huge role into shaping you. So were there any defining moments where you really started to feel proud of, like were you known through your school as being the singer, being the band player, or was it still like a little off the beaten path?
Yeah, it was interesting because the group of guys I played with, like my best friends growing up, we started playing together like in 6th or 7th grade, so super young, and we just started a band, and God knows what that sounded like. Monty, and God knows what that sounded like in 6th or 7th grade, right? But once we got into high school, we were playing. That's all we did all day, every day, right? So, organically, the next step is that we played pretty tight to each other in our genre, right? I don't know how many of the listeners would appreciate hardcore screaming emo stuff, but pretty much once junior year of high school, I knew that I was all in. I wanted to go on tour. That's all I wanted to do. Number one thing, right? I'm just barely trying to get through high school to graduate just so I can get on the road and tour. And in that band, I played guitar and I did like singing, like clean vocals. We did have a frontman in that band. And then, it kind of progressed until, we graduated and pretty much it was time to leave. And a couple of the guys were like getting career jobs and like, those types of things through DTE for their father and stuff like that. And they go, I don't know. There was kind of some talk behind the scenes. I don't know what Tyler's thinking. I can't go on tour. I got a job and that kind of stuff. So at that point, which is a pretty cool pivotal moment, we would do a lot of, in high school, we would do like a lot of long Christmas breaks and stuff like that, actually touring, regionally as far as we could in a weekend, right? So we were doing pretty big tours and we had some good attention label-wise if we could tour, but no label wants you if you're not touring, right? So we're kind of waiting on that whole graduate, let's sign some deals, let's get after it. And then I found out that, a couple of the dudes didn't want to go. And, that kind of relationship kind of broke apart. And I had reached out. I saw one of the bands that we ended up being friends with on one of our tours. They're from Indiana. They lost their vocalist. And I was like, right? So I reached out to these guys. I was like, yo, I want to try out. And they ended up, I forgot what was going on. I didn't have a car at the time, whatever. They ended up driving up from Indiana 4 hours to pick me up and drive me back down to try out. And that tryout's hilarious as it is. It's a story in itself. But that band, we ended up getting a deal and doing some pretty major tours and stuff like that.
So now what was that like? Because you went from the kid just banging on a drum set or messing with instruments as a 6th grader to like now you're really starting to experience the life. And I'm sure there's a pathway in front of you or some thought in your mind that like, what if this blows up? Is this my future?
Mm-hmm.
So let's not skip over this. But then let's talk a little bit about the time that you had in music where you're finding some success and you're really enjoying that experience. And I loved it, like when you just told me the story, they drove up. I love passion like that. I love things that don't even make sense that much, but they're passion driven. Those are really powerful moments in life. So talk a little bit about the music time and then what leads to the transition where you flip a switch and go, music's not going to be it. And then was there like a depression in that stage? Was there usually when people have to shift identity, it's a very difficult process. So let's talk about that time of your life.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head, man. I guess to get back, like what it was like touring, that was my dream all through, half of middle school, high school, that kind of thing, just get signed and tour. And, it was for a couple years and I didn't realize like how much I didn't really enjoy living in the back of a van, and until we got a deal, we could start affording some hotel rooms and stuff like that. But I didn't realize how much I didn't enjoy that part of just being on the road. I enjoyed playing shows, but when all of a sudden you go from playing a couple shows a weekend to every single night, back in the van, drive, unload equipment, and that kind of, monotonous. But the dudes were kind of, they're all older than me. So they're all a few years older than me. And, it got to the point where we came back from tour, we had some downtime. It was whether or not we were going to record a record, kind of an in-between moment. And our guitar player who wrote, a lot of our songs, he was like ready to settle down with his girlfriend, now wife at the time. So he's like, hey guys, I'm out. And that's a pretty big piece of that band, right? So we, we tried to do some side projects with a couple of the guys in there, kind of made it happen. But I was living in Kokomo, Indiana at the time. And, a little homesick. My girlfriend, long-term girlfriend at the time, came down to live with me. So there's some pressure to get back home as well. And I'm a plumber when we're not on tour. To add to the story, right? So, one of the guitarists who actually, ended up saying, hey guys, I want to kind of settle down, that kind of thing. His stepdad kind of father figure was a plumber. So we'd always go work for him when we weren't on tour. It was awesome. But at one point I thought I wanted to go be a journeyman as far as a plumber goes. But yeah, when the band broke up, I was still stuck down there in an apartment. We had a lease and that was pretty dark. So, anybody that follows my fitness journey, usually that's like my before era. Getting super depressed, eating like garbage, just the plumber lifestyle that we were living wasn't really a great one. And I didn't really have like any incentive to where like, I've always grew up really heavy. So I was always a really big kid. And then I lost a lot of weight the wrong way. not without a eating disorder or anything like that, but, cutting my calories super low. I wanted to be the skinny rock star, right? So that was interesting. Now that we don't play any shows, how much weight I gained. I gained probably like 40 or 50 pounds, which is crazy back before that. So depression kind of showed up, obviously, in that area, along with who am I, right? And I'm Tyler, the musician. And now I'm, 20-something, where all my friends are at least halfway through college. And I'm this low-life guy who left for the dream, the rock star dream. Most people don't understand it, right? And kind of feeling like a low-life when I moved back. So in that mix of time, I was training. I got into fighting. We one of the places we stayed at was actually like a martial arts gym because we had so many dudes. It was better than sleeping on a hard floor. We slept on the mats, right? So I remember fooling around in there. I'm like, that's it. When the band's up, this is what I want to do next, is the fighter thing. So, and at the time, this is the Wild West, but this is 2010, I think, 2009. So MMA was, if you were talking about cage fighting, people thought you were fighting for gangs, right? You know that. And so I started training a little bit up here, and then I moved back down, a little bit down there, but just here or there. So I had already been kind of training, but that was kind of like my next route. Is like, this is what I'm going to do next when I move back.
So passion is really fueling your life at this point. I mean, you were trying to be the rock star, which is an awesome dream, and it's something that so few people will ever even take a shot at doing. And you were like, I'm going to go for this thing. And then as that started to kind of, fade away, you're like, all right, there has to be something here. You happen to almost blunder upon an MMA gym. Do you remember the name of the gym?
No, it was out of state, like somewhere on the
So you happen to be in this place. You probably see passion in that environment. Right. You see another avenue. You start getting pulled in that direction. How far did you dive into that? Like, didn't you do an amateur bout, I thought?
Quite a few, yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
How many times you fought as an amateur?
Well, sanctioned, it was 2-1, but there's quite a few in Indiana before I moved back up here.
Got it.
Yeah,
very cool.
It was before it was sanctioned,
So then you're competing in amateur MMA. What team were you on?
As far as up here?
Like, just when you were competing, like who?
When I was up here, it was Team Undisputed. It was like Harley Wallen and Steve
Got it.
Freight.
Yeah, I know
like
those guys.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're competing. You're starting to find a new passion. You have a new avenue. You're like, okay, I'm going to do something with this now. I'm not being the plumber, which, by the way, Conor McGregor was going to be a plumber apprentice before he became,
Let's go.
Exactly.
I didn't know that, yeah.
I wanted to tell you that, he was just living in a 1-bedroom apartment with his girlfriend being like, I'm a plumber during this time, but I'm going to be a world champion. He's now the, richest athlete of the year type deal. But anyway, when does it start to hit you that, like, that's not the direction? You know what I mean? Because, like, I know you as, like, the fitness guy that really had a vision, you chased it, and now you've created a brand. But that's not even your story yet. You're not even really thinking about training people yet. You're just, I was going to be a rock star. Now I'm following the sport of MMA. When does the transition come where you start to see yourself as, like, you know what? This fitness is good for me mentally, physically. I'm going to start going to others. Yeah,
I think it kind of backpedal. I think at this point I still really haven't had a vision. I was kind of being reactionary, right? And, it looks from the outside, anybody asked me what my 5-year goal at the time was, I can't tell you. And I used to preach against them. I'm like, don't give me a 5-year goal. Like, what's next month? I'm here right now kind of thing. And I didn't realize, now looking back after doing a lot of inner work and those types of the real work, is I was very just motivated by validation, right? I got my identity now with a fight team and a tribe. That's my new tribe. I used to have bandmates, and that was who I associated with. And I come back, I sign up for a gym in Brighton, start training to be a fighter, right? And I wanted to impress the coaches and stuff like that. Tim was over there in Brighton, stuff like that. And I think it was definitely just driven off validation for a long time. So to kind of get from, fighting, I got to the point where I had started training out in Clinton Township, which is about an hour drive from here. And Harley, the coach at the time who invited me out, I was like, hey man, I want to keep training. Like, I was already had a couple fights up here again. And I was like, I want to keep training, man, but I can't afford to keep driving out here. Blah, blah, blah. I need to find a job. Like, I think at the time I was hopping around to different, fast food restaurants, whatever. And he goes, get certified and I'll hire you in. So he's the regional, or at the time was the regional director of all the YMCAs. And I had a big transformation of losing my weight again. And he was like, you get certified, I'll give you a job as a personal trainer. So I ended up getting certified, never working for him, started working out at Howell Fitness Center way back in the day. You spent some time with there
absolutely.
Too.
Howell Fitness Center, man. I mean, it's no longer in our community, but it was a staple of the community for quite a while.
Yeah, lots of good times there. So I worked behind the counter and had my little poster up on the counter of my before and afters and my fight stance. And I think my first personal training company was called Warrior Fit or whatever it might be. And that kind of took off like crazy. I'm a 19, 20-year-old kid, and my personal training clientele just started getting stacked. So that kind of graduated. I got invited out to a different big fitness train to be one of their fitness directors for one of their big showcase clubs. And from there, it just really turned into the conflict of most of our fight teams were training at night. My personal training clients want to train in the morning and at night. So it got to the point where I was seeing some success as a personal trainer. I need to pay the bills, kind of do the career thing. I wasn't ever a really great fighter. Like I haven't spent that much time training or anything like that. So I was like, this makes sense as I kind of have to choose that rather than keep training.
Would you say your passion started to shift that? Because I find most trainers that really go all in, they find passion in that. Because like you're starting to find some things that make you feel good. And also when you make other people feel good and you start helping them find those same things, it almost like refills your cup just as much as it's filling theirs. Would you say that's the case? Or did that grow over time?
Yeah, I think up front, I was just young and dumb, man. And I would like to say, like, obviously it felt good being there for people. I think something that has kind of came naturally as just an empathetic person. So I felt like it was easy to really get with people on what's really going on here rather than, hey, you want to lose weight? Here's a nutrition plan and stuff like that. Like, let's actually talk about some layers deep. Definitely had some crazy experiences up front with people losing like 100 pounds and pretty quick and stuff like that. So it was definitely like, okay, there's something here. As well as like, I grew up super poor. I was like the fat, chubby kid growing up. So I'm like, everybody else is graduating college. I'm like, this is fulfilling me on the career side of things. I'm actually feel like have a career purpose, whether or not I was actually following like what I felt like should be doing to my core, if that makes any sense.
No, 100%.
Yeah. So that was kind of the shift into fitness from, being claimed as I went from the fighter guy, now I'm just the trainer, right?
So now this is the magic moment, right? So most people, they never will make the jump to really seek to create something for themselves, whether it's a lack of self-confidence or they look at their past and say, oh, I grew up in this area. There's no way I can be successful and a leader. And they cut themselves down, or they believe the words that they've been told, or whatever it is. They weren't smart enough in school, and they never make a jump to actually try to create something. You're not one of those people. At a certain point of your life, you went, I have a vision, or you had an idea, or maybe it came from a conversation that you had, but True Fit was born. And since that vision, there are countless people around the world that their lives have been influenced from that moment. I want to really go into the depth, what led to that moment, the people that were involved, how the vision came together, how you found the confidence to do it. Like this is one of the magic moments in your story. And so I want you to speak on it as deeply as you can. Like imagine if you were going to talk to the young Tyler, that's like, I don't know if this is going to work or not. As the man that you are sitting here today, just try to really analyze what he was going through and like, how did this come to be?
Yeah, those are kind words, man. I appreciate that. So basically I'd been working for a very large gym chain, and so much gratitude for them. I got to learn from some of the best in the industry. At
What
their
gym
flagship
chain was it?
Powerhouse gyms.
Got it. Yeah, they were huge. The Davishes, it was all over at a time, especially back in this period. They were kind of like one of the premier spots nationwide.
Yeah. So respect and love for their family, and I got to learn from some of the best. And basically got to the point where I was at their, Novi location. I helped with the transition. I was a fitness director for when they took over that big one. And then they kind of sent me on some projects. So I was at South Lyon for a while, and then East Lansing. And basically I had a project in South Lyon before I went out to East Lansing, where it was, hype up sales and be a part of that, and kind of fulfilled that. I think they ended up selling that to a franchisee. I don't know. But they sent me to East Lansing kind of just for fulfillment, right? They wanted to make sure I had a job. And I kind of felt like I was out there not really serving, much of a purpose at that point. But it's important to kind of take a step back to South Lyon, because I was running or managing this club, and right next door to it was a jazzercise. And I was managing this club, and I remember I learned fitness sales, so I was hustling to do whatever I can to sell a $14 a month membership. And I was like hustling, calling like fish bowls, like the amount of like sales I actually did to with a beautiful club that has a group fitness classroom, great amenities, childcare, everything that you would need for $14 a month was our special at the time. I was having to hustle memberships. And I remember seeing our parking lot at the time, it got built up, but at the time was like not that many cars in the parking lot, and I'd look next door at Jazzercise, and the parking lot would be filled. And this is because Zumba just came out. And we couldn't host Zumba because there's a non-complete cause in the plaza that we couldn't do dancing stuff because Jazzercise is right next to it, right? But Zumba was so hot at the time, and I'm just like, and they're paying $60 a month, which I thought was unreal. Like, all they do is dance in a room, they're charging $60 a month, and I can't even sell a $14 a month membership, and we have group fitness. What is going on here? And at the time, like when I was in Indiana back and forth, CrossFit was very new thing. And I actually went to a place called CrossPit, which Chuck Liddell's trainer somehow co-branded with CrossFit, whatever, down there. So I enjoyed that style of training, flipping tires, sledgehammers. No one had ever seen a kettlebell before, that kind of thing. And I was like, I definitely want to start my own studio. Like, I definitely want to do it. But Zumba's going to be the key. Like, we're going to do this, right? So then I ended up doing a couple of projects, ends up in East Lansing, and then I kind of fulfilled that. And I was like, I got to find a studio. We're going to make some bank off Zumba. Of course, I'm going to train people in my circuit, the things like to my core value, but we got to do Zumba, which is hilarious. Not anything against Zumba, but just how much we've shifted, right? So,
well, and you were thinking the magic and the success was in the Zumba, not in the community, not in the networking amongst people, not in the energy that was between their tribe. That's the magic. I mean, you know that now, but you were just like, this Zumba stuff is really like, they got it. You know what I mean? But it's like looking through it, you were looking at it through the wrong lens at the time. You just thought, whatever Zumba is, I just need to throw that in here and we're successful.
We'll put the bells on our waist. Let's do it, man.
It doesn't matter the people that I have in charge. It doesn't matter the culture. It's Zumba. That's awesome. So you're probably fascinated by that because I'm picturing you being in that moment. You're going like, what the hell? I got this club. It's a quarter of the price.
Yeah.
What are they doing? But then there's probably some learning process. You go to the CrossFit thing, you experience something, and it probably connected with you, right? You felt connected to that style of workout. And that's where it starts to turn some wheels. Like, wait a second, what if it's not the facility? What if it's the environment? What if it's the programs?
You nailed it on the head, man. And like you obviously know, but boutique fitness at that time, this is about like 2012, 2013, wasn't really even a thing, right? Jazzercise was like the closest thing that boutique fitness really was. And, I basically had served my purpose out in East Lansing, and I, found some studio space. I had some help with some people I love and adore. They hooked me up with like $14,000 to open up my first studio here in Howell.
You were just right down on the corner, the Crossway, right? Like right on D19. Isn't that where you guys were at?
A little bit. There's actually two different spaces before we moved into the original one for the Howell location, but it was right in like the J.J. Jingleheimer Plaza. So it was in that plaza, and then right next door we ended up moving shortly after. So there was two buildings kind of close. But I remember signing a $1,200 a month lease, super nervous, and I'm like trying to do my personal training, but Zumba we're gonna sell some Zumba memberships.
That's Zumba, bro. Listen, I don't know what I have to do, but I know it's Zumba.
Yeah, so we hung some bags. It's super small. I had about like 1,000 square feet, so we barely fit. We packed them in there, but it was really special, man, just from the get-go. And it was the community thing. I couldn't put my picture on it at the time. I'm like, I just want to give people a really affordable option to do personal training. That was the goal. And then it turned into, definitely being the tribe that kept people around everything that we know now. But
so now all of a sudden you start making a major impact because when you start to create tribes, there's natural influence and like there's culture that's created. And if you create positive culture, it absolutely affects the people's lives that interact with it. And it can affect the lives of their families. And it can affect like a man's decision to become an alcoholic, like you had to struggle with your father, or to be a better human being could come down to the things he does in his leisure time. It could come down to the tribe that he's a part of. It could come down to the workouts that he does. Sometimes we don't think about it to that level, but that's how crucial the impact can be of a community. So you're doing that. It probably builds up slowly. You start to find more success. You probably make a million mistakes in business. I'm fast forwarding through the details that I feel like most people would expect. At what point is it like, this is working, my passion is here, I have a vision, and then it turns into like, we can recreate this in other locations? Because that's another huge step. Becoming an entrepreneur is a big step. Believing in yourself is a big step. But then going like, now we're going to scale this process. Did you have business mentors guiding you that were saying like, hey, you need to scale. You take what you're doing, you replicate it, you do this, you do that. Was it that cut and dry, or was it Tyler laying in bed going, what can we do now?
Yeah, it was super reactionary in the beginning.
I like how you keep saying that. I like how like later in life now you're able to reflect on your story and you probably laugh about it a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're like, you know what? I was just a dog chasing cars. I was just the guy like from there. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, let's do this. But now like the man you are today, if we took you back 10 years in the past, you'd probably go 100 times bigger in no time, right?
Right. Yeah, it wasn't, I kind of talk about it too, and we were jamming on this a little bit before we started talking, but I think I was at a huge advantage, and a huge advantage of what my baseline was for good living, right? As much as like the trailer and, the story about my upbringing and stuff like that could sound tragic, it's like, nah, at the end of the day, I still had an okay life. I had friends, I didn't go without a meal. Like there was a lot of privilege still in that, scenario. I watched my parents' cars get, repossessed out of the driveway, stuff like that. Like I kind of experienced it all, and I was like, none of that was really that scary, which sounds super irresponsible. But for taking risk, what's the worst that's going to happen? I move into a trailer. I have an okay life. We'll figure it out. Like life isn't over, right? Which some of the leaders and so forth that I have the opportunity of mentoring and stuff like that. It's like risk aversion feels a lot different, and I never really had that because I'm like, that sounds good. What's the worst that can happen? Have a bad credit score, hit the trailer, like we'll build that up, that kind of thing. So, right when we opened in January 2013. Within like 3 or 4 months, we outgrew that space and took over another storefront next door with a phenomenal trainer that I had met. I had so many relationships inside the industry from working at different gyms, and she did some yoga and spin next door, but we outgrew it so fast. So literally within six months, within 6 months, we opened our second location in South Lyon. And that was from a brother of mine, good friend of mine, Steve Avey, and he was a trainer at the South Lyon location. And he kind of came to me, he goes, hey, man, whatever you're doing here, I love it. It's great. From the outside, it looked awesome, right? Our room was packed. He knew what we were charging people. People do napkin math on how much we were making. In the meantime, my car's getting repossessed out of the back of the studio as well for not really understanding it to a T at that point. And he ended up getting, he ended up opening up his location. I was his partner there. So like the first 5 locations, I was partners with them before I knew that they'd get more value out of being a franchise and stuff like that in the future. But 6 months later, we opened our second location. The first location had to grow again within 9 months. Whether we were really financially prepared for that or not, it's just that was the next move. Like, what's the next thing? And that was kind of always my flaw to a point, but it ended up working out in some ways where it's like I'm always chasing that next validation high, the next dopamine hit, whatever it might be on the next maneuver because, it was good feeding my ego, my validation. But at this time I thought it was, being a visionary and stuff like that, which it served its purpose. But now I will definitely speak to being aligned and actually knowing who you are and those types of things before you really make goals in those types of moves. So.
But you were always probably making sure that your people were taken care of and the program and the system was operating first, and then you were secondary, right? Yeah. So like TrueFit was operating and running, and even if you were struggling on the backside, you were keeping up the things that you need to be responsible for, which allows you to take on more. Like if your relationships were crumbling because you weren't paying your staff and you're doing these things, you have no chance at growth. Right. You have no chance at scaling. So you take on a second location 6 months in operation, which is huge, right? And now that gentleman is kind of like exclusively running that location because you guys are partners and you're focused on yours, or are you trying to oversee both? And was that difficult?
He was definitely like the operator in-house, but I was definitely like way more involved than I would be in a franchise model now, right? It wasn't about, I'm a big, and you can probably relate to this as well, but at the beginning, I think it was a blessing. I talk about this often. Like I had a leader I was chatting with on a call the other day, and he's a photography business. It's just himself. I'm like, whatever you need to do, you need to hire staff, whether you need it or not, because you need to be accountable to someone, right? Or else the days of procrastination, stuff like that. I think a blessing in disguise at that point is I did have a lot of people counting on me right away, whether they knew what it looked like, behind the scenes, crushing it, at my home or whatever. But same thing with him. It's working. A, I'm a people pleaser, but B, I had people counting on me, right? So it was a lot of bandwidth. But I was helping with, logistics challenges and pre-sales and stuff like that.
So you set yourself up where you had to perform, though. I mean, you all of a sudden have these people depending on you. It's not just you. It's not just your studio that as long as the bills get paid and you could be complacent. Right. You could just kick back, set cruise control, and be in the same location 30 years later.
Right.
You have Zumba. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But instead, you were like, no, like, I got to push to the next level because now all of a sudden my buddy's running a studio, this person's running a studio. And then as soon as you open two, it has to beg the question, like, how many more can we do?
Yep.
Why can't we scale from here?
Yeah.
Why can't we replicate this model all over? Why can't we find the right passionate people in all different parts of the world? It makes perfect sense. When do you think the character growth happened for you where you really started to get your shit together? Because that's like a great moment in everybody's lives. And maybe if you want to talk about a couple defining moments where whether it was setbacks or failures, when did you really start to get a grasp on like, okay, this is who I am. This is how I'm successful. These are the people I need to keep in my company. You know what I mean? Like, when did you really start to get it together? Because from an outside view, once you start having a couple locations, if they don't see the books and they don't see behind the scenes, you're already successful in the eyes of like local peers and stuff. But you really know what's all going on and you know where your mental state is at. Because just because you have a business together, I know people that are very financially successful that are shit shows mentally. When do you think, because I've watched a transformation happen in you over the years at a distance and been like, man, you've really figured out a lot. You've been able to look at things through different lenses. You've been able to reflect. You've put very honest admissions of vulnerability, which is like a huge sign of growth. When did that start to come together?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like even, after the first couple of years, I felt good about our model being proven. Like we knew what we were doing, things were working, but as well as I do, the fitness industry changes by the second, right? And, when it comes to Facebook posts and marketing changes, all those types of things. So, the first 2 years, it was so cool. Something very, very special happened inside of our locations. And I don't take credit for it. We had phenomenal coaches, phenomenal community that for our first, probably 10 locations, it was just from people inside of our community who were true fitters that wanted to open up a location, right? So they would come approach me. Some I thought would be a good fit, some I didn't. I didn't even know what that weeding process looked like at the time. I'm like, here, this is what we did. You could potentially get a couple of credit cards at the point. Like the gateway to entry was so low to open up a facility. And that kind of just happened organically. And for me, it was, not really a step back to like think about if this is a good maneuver. It was honestly like I had validation stuff. I had girlfriends that I felt insecure with, and whether it was they had boyfriends in the past that might come from a wealthy family or something like that, and I'm like, oh, let's open up another location. That will boost me up a little bit and stuff like that, right? So it was validation for a long time. And kind of back on your question about when that shift was, I think there was a couple. And I think there was the first one where I kind of felt confident in my role and who I was as a person. And then there's the next moment where I knew that I had some serious shadows I had to do some work on and do the work there. I can't really tell you a defining moment where I finally felt like I wasn't desperate for attention anymore. It was probably when I was 25 or something like that. I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm no longer the chubby kid. I'm the fitness guy. We have 7 locations, whatever it was at the time. I was like, I feel better. Like I don't feel like I was chasing that. And that was a good shift for me because Tyler, desperate for attention and validation, is a not so great dude. Excuse me. And then the next shift was actually probably a couple years ago where it really started. A little bit before the pandemic, where I really started doing my shadow work. Maybe a couple years before it, I did a marathon, and I forgot what year it was, a handful of years ago. And that marathon training really pulled out a lot of stuff for me. Right, I was like, we're kind of jumping forward, but right before this marathon, I hadn't done anything fitness-wise. So at that point, I'd already been like, I've done MMA for a little bit, not nearly what you guys do to this level. I had, I had done higher level CrossFit competitions. I had done a men's physique competition. I had done all these fitness things that were giving me validation. And at that point, I kind of like let my fitness go, was focused on business and stuff like that, which there's plenty of those cases in my life. I just went through it again. The marathon training really started dragging stuff up. I was doing a lot of self-development. I was doing a lot of podcasts, audio books and Bible and stuff like that. And I really started being like, what is going on here? Because my relationships were garbage, right? Like I was depressed and miserable behind the scenes. I show up to work. No one knows. Like no one knows. I held it together well, and it's not woe is me. I chose to be in that position. But, anytime I would, a lot of people look forward to the weekend was the most depressing time for me, being alone and, depressed and, terrible relationships, toxic behavior on my end, like things I'm really not proud of, kept compounding. And I'm like, dude, this stuff keeps showing up. Like, I have to do something about these trends, right? So that's probably got 4 years ago. There was a time, actually, it's worth telling a story, around the first shift where I felt like I didn't really have to chase for validation anymore, where I was like, I think I was 25 or 26, and I had gotten married super fast and had a very short divorce. And we don't have to go into details on what that happened, but it was humiliating to me. And I remember stepping back for like a year or two after that, 3 years, where that was the longest I had ever been without a relationship. And I was like, hey, like, I'm good there. Before that, it was, I had to have a relationship, right? Because that, who I'm with, serves me. Validation really has nothing to do with the other person at the time. And that really shook me out the right way. I'm like, man, I'm in a leadership position. At the time, we had probably, 10 locations. And I'm like, this is really embarrassing for people that watch that happen. So that's, a couple years of being single. And I'm like, next time I get in a relationship, it's going to be respected for sure.
Do you think it made you jaded for a little bit of time or get to the point where like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm just not cut out for this. I can't, before you start really doing the self-work and you start, because a lot of the times it's so hard to stare in the mirror and be like, yo, you're the common denominator. That is hard. And a heartbreak or like death or really severe things where you felt your reputation at the time, which meant a lot to you. That validation was a big driving factor in your story. That got shattered or shaken to some degree. Like, look at me, like I'm supposed to be the man that's got it all together. I had this quick marriage and then it falls apart like that. Like it's, like you said, humiliation you're feeling. Did the light switch flip pretty shortly after, or was it the period of reflection slow and painful, but then it finally pulled you together?
Yeah, it was interesting for me because it all happened so quick that I'm like, yo, that was silly.
I didn't even know you got married. Yeah. When you just said that here, that's the first time. And like I said, I think we've been friends on Facebook for 10 years, but I had no idea that it ever happened. So it must have been in a short window of time.
It was a short window of time, happened pretty quick. And I was just, I had pretty extreme viewpoints on how I felt marriage was supposed to go and stuff like that based on my faith and whatnot. And, we got into that, but there was also a big, we got into it. I knew it was a mistake. It ended up coming to fruition with a handful of different cases inside the relationship. But after that, I was extremely jaded. At first, it was bitterness because the story that I felt was going around wasn't really what happened. And I was just like, screw this. Like, I'll keep everybody at an arm's distance, right? Like, I feel like I'm really close to a lot of our members that I know and stuff like that. At that point, it made me kind of bitter. Just because I'm like, man, you guys like know me to know better than that kind of thing. And then eventually I was like, Tyler, extreme ownership. Like I just have to start taking ownership for my stuff. Right. So, it was a roller coaster, I feel like, for a couple of years, but I was also like, I'm not like, this relationship thing doesn't need to be a focus of mine right now. Cause obviously I'm doing something wrong. And then I think I just went deep into business. Right. So if you look over those 3 years, like massive growth for TrueFit, right. Cause maybe I just put my attention all on that. Or maybe I had a chip on my shoulder or something to prove and like build my reputation back up, And I had some of these stories that I worked through, and I just recently released a book that is like practices that we go through. It's called You're Not Finished, and it's leadership and development. It's a bit of a process, but the first point being is like not knowing who you are. And I kept having these stories of I call it thieves, and then your truth and thieves. And my thief at the time was that my integrity wasn't there. Like I don't have good integrity, right? But my other truth, my counterpart to that was, but no one will outwork me. So you kind of saw that come to fruition for those first 3 years after that, which has been great. We have phenomenal life changes inside of our facilities and so forth, but still the shadow that we're talking about, it still hadn't came to light yet and done the real work.
And you're really trying to find the happiness that you deserve, because there's nothing more terrifying than to start experiencing success and experiencing the American dream and experiencing all these things that are supposed to make you just radiate happiness, and all of a sudden you're not feeling it. That is a very empty position to be in, and that's where a lot of the times you have to do the work, because you go, I got a nice car, I've got this, I have these locations, I'm supposed to just be happy. And then you find out, wait a second, this life by design we have to have purpose. We have to have meaningful relationships. We have to have value deeply rooted within ourselves for who and what we are and what we believe we should be, and then the
100%.
people in our lives. And this is not taught. We don't get taught this as a child. You know what I mean? Like, and you can complain about the education system all you want, but you have to learn these things if you want to really get it together as a human being.
Yep.
So were there any defining moments coming through the chaos? Friendships, relationships, love from even strangers, you know what I'm saying? That started to give you that appreciation and beauty in life again. Because if you lose that, life can be a cold, gray, doesn't matter how much money's in your bank account. I know people that are on antidepressants that are millionaires.
Right.
You got to refine the passion. You got to find purpose. How did that start to come to fruition? I'd love to, by the way, I'd love to get a copy of your book, man. I'd love to get a copy of your book and be able to read it. Because
that, man.
we have so many times with passionate entrepreneurs, there's more parallels than you would ever imagine. You know what I mean? Like, the stories have parallels. And if more people that are struggling and complaining would realize there are all these clues to success, and all of these people that have seemed to find purpose and meaning, and they connect with who they are, and they live in a way that fulfills them. There are clues in those stories. They're common denominator. I would love to read it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, we all think we're beautiful, rare, unique butterflies, but at the same time, we're all common people with common problems, right? And a lot of us just get into these positions without mentorship. And at the time, that was a big fault for mine at the beginning, because I had been mentored in the fitness industry, obviously with the previous company. But when it got into TrueFit, I was, obviously doing a lot of self-study online and stuff like that, but I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody walking me through it. Eventually when we got to franchising, my attorney helped me. When we're going through those documents, I'm learning that. But my imposter syndrome would get triggered by that, and that was a big growth period. I'm not necessarily sure when it happened, but for a long time, early on, I was a young CEO. Like at 23, I opened up TrueFit, right? So I'm like a CEO that's now the founder CEO of a bunch of franchises, and it felt wrong to me that I had to get mentored in some of those. I should know these, and I do know these, and my pride and validation battled me for a long time, and then leaps and bounds when we started going to other companies, consultants, mentors, and stuff like that too. So it was definitely imposter syndrome for a long time. I felt like I had to have it all together, play this role, show up. I was always working hard, but then, when you get those little integrity defects, or, even the divorce thing, that was like crushing to me, because I'm like, man, I just tried to build up my reputation and stuff like that, So, what was really cool through that whole experience is I had two really beautiful friendships that just like I would, kind of do anything for. And what was interesting is I've always been kind of a lone wolf, and in the sense of I've always had a significant other. As far as friendships and stuff like that go, I was in the band, but we had this weird band drama where I felt like I was the outcast, and no one really liked me for the high school one. The one after that was a little bit different. So when it's come to really trusting people, has been a big something to work through, that I, hope I've done the work at this point. But there's a couple friendships that really shone through to that had my back, and I would do anything for. My buddy Nick and my friend Bonnie, that really just stepped up there and had my back in that moment. And that was hard, I'm sure, for you as well. It's leaders, it's hard to, ask for help and those types of things. So to kind of answer your question, loved ones and that kind of thing, had two really beautiful friendships, of course, with my family, but that's to be expected, and you kind of feel like a burden. That was a very, great lesson through that. And they're still, really near and dear to my heart.
So let's talk a little bit about one of the most eventful moments of our life without saying it by name, so this podcast doesn't get flagged and taken down like my other stuff. But 2020 was a wild year, and it was an incredibly difficult year. And you're crushing it before that, because you're starting to get it together. How many locations do you have going into 2020?
In 2020, we were I think at 25 or 24.
So you're killing it. You have a ton of different, and you didn't go the licensing route. You went franchising route. Yeah. So you really have a hand in all the locations you set up. It all comes back to you. So you're crushing it. 2020 comes, and everybody gets slapped upside the face. The whole world gets flipped upside down. Are you in a good mental state going into this year? And then I want to kind of talk about, we don't have to make it long-winded, but what 2020 was like, any revelations that you pulled out of that, any progress? Because I feel like a lot of people that had to press a reset button there that generally don't like to reset. Like a lot of go-getters do not like to slow down. They don't like silence. They want to be productive. 2020 was like, no, bitch, you're going to slow down.
Sit. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that period, and now coming out of it and being on the other side, even despite all the things that are going on right now. you probably have a little bit different of an outlook. Things are changed. New perspectives were formed. Let's start to build that part of the story.
Yeah, I love this prompt, man. So I feel like 2019 was our biggest growth year yet, right? So we had opened up 8 new locations or something crazy, and before that was a couple years and that kind of thing. So we're cruising at that point, and I have my my HQ team, a handful of phenomenal individuals. I personally felt really secure in who I was as far as a leader goes at that point, and I was going through this kind of crazy thing that was ironic right before it happened, where I was just getting rid of all my like material possessions and stuff like that. I was kind of going on a hippie kick, and I was just like, where am I putting my attention? Is this all validation driven? I'd already been doing like the hippie self work before then, and I got rid of like my bougie loft in Detroit, and I got rid of my like bougie car, my AMG or whatever. And it was crazy that all that happened right before 2020 happened, because we didn't know what was going to come out of that at that point, right? So it's like, oh, there's some liabilities. That was cool, but I felt really good about who I was, I thought, going into that year. And, obviously the world got shut down, and the amount of pressure, and this isn't what was me, just being honest with you, was crippling going into, 2020. At first it was a couple months, and we're like, hey, we'll suss it out. And it kept getting more. And, my franchisees are going to a direct leader. So of course I'm holding it down and, giving them the best advice I can. What kind of advice can you give in something we've never been through, right? And we're making our pivots, and we had a lot of wins inside of that year of maintaining members, but also what we were able to provide for our members and stuff like that. Different demographics could handle it different. So that was another thing. In Livingston County, COVID was very much different than what it was like downtown Detroit, or the things that we could do. So it was a lot, man. And we had some huge wins as far as that goes. But the main thing the pandemic did for us in a very awesome way is like, really aligned everything. So there was, a couple locations that were newer right before that happened, and they would have the opportunity to get out of their leases. Of course, like we, get out of your lease right now. We don't know what's going to happen. Do whatever's right for your family. Like we, gave them permission to help them do that. There was also a couple other locations where very beautiful leaders, and, friends of mine, but we just weren't aligned on our vision at the time. Right. So inside of our franchise, you had mentioned like a license versus franchise, like, compliance was something that I was already working on, right? And compliance sounds like a rule, or like me wanting to crack a whip, but more so it's just to protect, my franchisee's business. Like, hey, do this because it will help you, rather than I'm not trying to dictate everything you do. I was, we kind of went by the term franchise model, right? So I'd like to give people freedom and stuff like that inside of the model, as well as they're following our systems, and they'll be, successful. So what 2020 did to me is there was actually a couple of locations that weren't aligned in how we serve our people. We had mutually asked both of them to rebrand. There was some team members in my office, for the HQ office, that weren't aligned with that mission either. And I had asked them, mutually we parted ways as well. And it wasn't that I was trying to lay people off. I kept, wanting to make sure my people were taken care of and stuff like that as far as HQ goes. But it was crazy that some of those relationships, you kind of think like it's kind of scary at some points. Major roles inside my office, and also locations that were successful. They do a good job. It's just they weren't aligned with how we did. So I finally got to the point at the beginning of 2020, or kind of midway through, I go, everything has kind of been reactionary based on validation, and somehow I just got here, right? And a lot of people are like, did you have this on a 5-year plan? No, I just kind of rode the wave. I really took the time and space I had to be like, is this something I choose? Why is this not bringing me life? I got dark in 2020, and I think most leaders had a hard time, right? And I was just like, battling with that, but I was like, why is this not bringing me life? And then that really brought all this on alignment in some of our core values that kind of got twisted along the way, and all those types of things. And we kind of took a big exhale after some of those relationship separations. And I'm like, if HQ or we never open up another location again, I'm going to work with a solid group of people that I'm aligned with. It doesn't make these other people bad, but a solid group of people aligned that I can provide value for, and that we're aligned at the biggest picture, which is transforming all lives, right? Rather than some products are just premium, which means that's not all lives. It's people that can afford that product or whatever it might be, and that kind of thing. So after realigning with that, man, huge exhale, I finally got like big joy and excitement about growing this in an incredible way. We hadn't franchised any locations for a couple years. We had to open up a couple. We didn't have to. We got to open up a couple in the middle of the pandemic, and that was a huge win. One in Tennessee and one in Flint. But I hadn't opened up any new franchises, signed any for a couple years. We didn't know what was going on, but it's cool because it's been like a couple years of just going back to the drawing board hammering out everything. Our model, how we do things, it's proven. Locations are doing great now. And we're just now, we just signed a handful of new locations that we're excited to announce here soon. But it was like, redesigning.
That makes perfect sense. And when you use the word alignment, there's such a relaxation or a calmness in your spirit when there is alignment. When you can have a culture that if you're the captain of a ship, the people of the ship have to agree upon, like they have to be happy with the course. If you've got people wanting to rip the steering wheel out of your hand, or one's wanting to light the thing on fire and one's wanting to do this, it is so much chaos and stress that like I only think entrepreneurs can understand the word alignment. Like when you say it, it hits me deeply because I know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
It is, that word does not encompass how crucial it is. And I don't know your process for that, but like for me, whenever I start to get, if I ever see, and this is going to sound very derogatory, but I'm going to just put it out the way that it is. When I see negative culture, when I see people that are bringing the wrong energy, when I see, it's like an infection.
Yep.
And it will literally spread to the entire environment. And no one person, myself included, do I put over the value of the overall project. I don't care if you are our number one most successful fighter in history. If you start to become, and God, I don't mean to sound this way, but an infection to the positive culture, I have to let you go. I have to let you go. And you know what? It's best for you. And it's best for the project. So when I picture you going through this process, I picture you almost going back to mission statements, back to your values as a human being, back to what does this really mean? What is this culture? Why do people come here? So did you basically just pull in your core group and you sat down in a vulnerable state and said, like, look, this is what true fit has to be? Or like, what does the process of alignment look like on your end for someone that, like, I understand the word. When you say it, I get it. Okay. But like to an outsider, what did you have to go through to get that stressful feeling of like, oh my God, like, it's like, is there going to be a mutiny on the ship, or do we really have something beautiful that's going into the future? What did that look like?
Yeah, great question, man. I think there's a twofold. There's what does it look like in the business, and then also just like personal, right? And like inside of business, I very much so to a fault, really want to bring people's opinions to the table, right? And like soundboard all of my team members and make sure they feel heard and those types of things, because I have core values of empowering people and those types of things. A big firm thing of my leadership at first was, hey, if you can't sit in a room and try to make a decision anymore of what you feel is right to your heart as well, that's a big gap as well. Like you're leaning on your soundboard too much, which doesn't mean. At the time, I didn't realize that would be an issue, right? But when you're leaning on a soundboard where everybody in the room has different core alignments and so forth, that's not doing you any good, right? So, of course, I have a couple friends, they're near and dear to my heart. I've already expressed to them that I always throw stuff in their lap because it's very unbiased. And people are people at the end of the day. We all have egos, we have validations. So no matter what, some feedback's going to be biased sometimes. But it really took me to kind of just sit in the shadow, the uncomfortability, and really look at what is this? Why were we crushing it so much in the beginning? What happened in the beginning to make this movement so special, rather than how did we get here in this weird disruptive state? And that was very helpful. Personally, I have a process that I go through often, and it's ironic, but that's kind of what the book's about, is a whole process of really going through alignment. But the biggest issue is I don't think I'm alone when people kind of just drift through life, or they get statements, or they take a test in high school of what your gifts are, and that's what your career should be. I'm like, man, if I would have taken that in high school, like, I'm a completely different person last year, let alone 20 years ago, right? And this is no hit on people that found their career and their life, what they love early on, but you will not understand real peace and real joy and real passion and purpose and like ultimately like euphoria, enlightenment, unless it responds to your core values, right? So at the beginning, the first chapter is like talking about who you are. And I had this really defining moment. I was on the mat. I'll make this a little bit of a shorter story, but I was doing my yoga teacher training here in Howell, and my teacher, Steve Buchanan, would tell these stories at the end of session. It was every time we get to it'd be like 5 hours for a long time. It was like 200 hours, but he was telling this yoga story about how he was asked by his teacher, "Who are you?" And he goes, I'm a vet, I'm a husband, all those types of things. And he stopped him. He goes, "Take away what you do, and who are you?" And he was using that as a story. And the meanwhile, I'm sitting on my mat, just like starting to sweat and getting nauseous, right? And I'm like, dude, I don't know how to answer that. If anybody would ask me before, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a leader, I'm a brother, all those types of things. And I drove home on that car ride home and probably teared up, man. It was pretty dark. I was like, dude, I don't know who the heck I am to my core, right? And that takes some work, and we can save the process for later or whatever, but usually start with who you're not, like the things that drive you nuts or send you over the rail, who you're not, and that usually points to a core value, whatever it might be when I work with this with people. But it really took a lot of work to align who I am. Why is this not bringing me life? And as much as that sounds like, Tyler, don't make your decision for the movement, I'm like, these are all people that started it based on those things as well. So there was a lot of alignment inside, the pandemic, which is really beautiful.
No, I think you dropped some gold in the insight right there. Like, you have to start internally. Mm-hmm. So many people want to control the external because it seems easier. Mm-hmm. It seems like if I could just make this person do this and this do this and this do this, without realizing, like, if you can become what you're meant to be and then present that version to the world, you will have a completely different experience with every single thing you interact with because you're different. Your energy will hit people different. Your words will have a different impact. Everything will be different. So it's not about trying to control so many of these external factors. You have to start inside. I've gone through that from darkness. We were talking before the podcast. A lot of darkness made me find out, who is James Gray? What does that essence or driving force desire? What really fills him up? Not your job description, not whether you're a public speaker or not. These are all such detached external factors from the consciousness experiencing this life that wants to define itself. My name is James Gray. Someone told me that. So, and it's an incredible process. And the amount of people that do that self-reflection is not many, an extremely small percent, and especially in Western culture, because it is not taught. It is not, it might not even be productive for the society that we live in if you had everyone trying to discover themselves, you know what I mean? Because, like, I don't know if the machine would function. Yeah. I don't know if the machine would function.
Yeah, you nail it on the head, especially with our culture as well. It's like, it wasn't until I was surrounded with other avenues or media or whatever it is to really start doing that learning on my own. But most of the people, I chat with about that process and so forth, they're like, minds are blown here, especially in the U.S., especially generationally. Like, I talk to some of, maybe our parents' age, I don't want to call them clients, but people that allow me to mentor them in that space. And it's just like, they have never had the space or been invited to do that. It's not that they choose not to a lot of times. It's that they've never been invited to really do that. So a whole life of unfulfillment and choosing careers, not really ever feeling happy or driven or purpose and those types of things. It's really unfortunate. And it's like kind of becoming my core work that I get a little bit, excited about, but also a little bit like there's some urgency here as well.
100%. I mean, people almost get stamped in these neat little boxes of what you should be in this life and what we've already defined your capabilities. We've already told you through school what level of intelligence you have. We've already told you how popular you are and how good you are with people. Right. So go out in the world and fit in your box. Like, that is almost the product that comes out of schools. Yep. And you can let that frustrate you and piss you off or be whatever, demand this and that. But it is your responsibility to make a change. Yep. No one else's. And absolutely, leaders that inspire, leaders that motivate, leaders that can show people that, and even just tell them there's a doorway that you never knew existed. Like, you think you're trapped by these four walls, but there's a door. Yep. And if you just open it, there's a different version of you on the other side of the door. I was actually I meditate frequently, but I was in a flotation tank, and I had an unbelievable realization probably about 5 years ago. Because I've been on, like, the spiritual journey for a long time. Because I think jiu-jitsu and martial arts kind of force that. Yeah. Like, if you're going to put yourself on the line, especially in, like, a big case. Like, I fought in Brazil, out of the country, with people that wanted to rip my head off, and I'm the only American down there. Like, you don't speak the language, and they're chanting, "Va mujer," which means, like, you're going to die. They actually chant that, swear to God. I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil, with Brian. I bring one of my students. You go through a lot of inner work. You face all your fears. You face self-doubt. You face, But anyway, I was in a flotation tank. For the people that don't know what this is, a sensory deprivation tank. And I was doing an hour session. I was floating. And I have a very quiet mind. And when I was younger, I didn't. I had a very loud mind. I had a very chattery mind. I had it always had to be saying something, song lyrics, something was just on repeat. And then somewhere along my life, after a lot of ups and mainly downs, I got a very quiet mind. When I'm not actively thinking, my mind shuts up. And it's very foreign. So I started seeking more depth in that. Like, if I just shut up for an hour, where would this take me? And I came to this unbelievable statement that I only really share with entrepreneurs or people that I think can understand the frequency. I've never said this on a podcast or anything like that. I got to this sentence that all I am in this life is what I believe myself to be. And at first, when you hear those words, it doesn't really impact you if you're not on that frequency. But what it was is, if I defined myself as a young child as I'm not a public speaker, then that is what I believe myself to be, and I will live my entire existence like I'm not a public speaker. But if I just realize that all I am is what I believe myself to be, if I switch that internal belief to, maybe as a child I wasn't a public speaker because I was shy and I hadn't learned to relate with people or speak with enthusiasm, or I wasn't articulate, well then if I change that narrative and say I can speak to an audience of any size, well, guess what? My potential to do so instantly changes. And I'm sure, I know you've done some huge public speaking. I've spoken now to 5,000 people for 45 minutes without writing something down. Let's go. And it was effortless because the internal belief changed. And it says, you're absolutely capable of this. And that's one of the biggest things I try to imprint upon my students, because a lot of people try to figure out, like, why does SFS have the success we do? Like, we're the only gyms in Michigan's history to ever put a male and a female in the UFC. We're the only gym to do we're the largest. Why? I am very, very good at getting people to believe in themselves. Not, hey, believe in yourself because I believe in you. I'm, for some reason, and I think it's because of the internal work, which is probably why you have the same impact on people. Because I've done the actual work, I am very good at, like, somehow being a mirror that someone goes like, dude, what if I can be a professional? What if I can be all those things that I thought I wasn't? And, like, so when I try to tell people things like, whatever you are declaring to yourself, even on a subconscious level, because that's not in your conscious thought. Your regular brain's not like, you suck out loud. It might be, but usually those are deep, dark, pushed away. I don't want to recall these moments or these places or these things that I've experienced, but you suck. If you can get back down to, like, you are literally just consciousness experiencing the world. And one of the things we work with a lot of struggling court kids, and I always tell them, if someone was to walk in this building right now as you and I speak, and we both stood up and introduced ourselves as men, hey, my name's James Gray, nice to meet you, hey, my name's Tyler Koronich, they would only know the human beings that exist in this moment through the trials, through the tribulations, through the ups and downs, through the mistakes, through the shame, through the guilt, through the humiliation. They would only know that version. So if you can find out that you have that power within you, that every single day of your life is an opportunity to create the person that you're meant to be, that society didn't want you to be, you're free.
Yeah, you crush it, man. That was it. It's like, I would like to assume, correct me if I'm wrong, is like your athlete's performance is going through the roof as a byproduct of them going to war against that limiting belief, right? Same thing why I got so passionate about this work, even in the fitness industry. I'm like, we go to war against your limiting belief that whether you're not good enough, you don't believe in yourself, you don't follow through, you're not dedicated, whatever it might be, your story is why you're not getting the results. The world doesn't need another nutrition protocol or fitness protocol, right? Most people who struggle with fitness know more than the average person on the street anyway when it comes to fitness, right? But I'm like, you have some kind of limiting belief where you, don't feel you're valuable enough to achieve that success, you're not dedicated enough, whatever it might be. The limiting beliefs are everything. And I think something special you just said as well is, like, you get to show up today who you're created to be. We even, like, define our character defects, our personality, those types of things as who we are. This is my struggle. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. I'm like, no.
You believe yourself to be that, bro. You're actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Go ahead and tell yourself that you're publicly awkward, and you'll remain it.
And I'm always like, listen, motherfucker, like, you can choose your miracle of being today. You can choose whatever you want to be. my encouragement to be is spend some time knowing what you want that to be. Does it align with your core values? Like, know who you are before you do that. But we get aligned so much of this is who I am, personality type, these boundaries and so forth, and the joy and the excitement that comes from living outside that is huge.
And there is an incredible fulfillment, happiness. I can't even explain. There's like not the right word to articulate when you are in full alignment with yourself, and then that self is expressing itself to the world. If people could understand how that is probably the most valuable thing in my life. If people could understand the feeling of being someone that is living fully as you are, every human being on this planet would work towards that. Every single human being. And you are so accurate about, like, I recently just got called in to do this, like, last minute. Someone, I don't want to throw the person under the bus, but somebody set up this big thing for a company where they were going to have, like, a wellness person speak to the employees and then all these things. And then, like, they didn't do any of the work. So 48 hours before, they were calling and freaking out, like, oh my God, I need this person to go. They called the yoga instructor here and was like, listen, I got this real estate company that's coming in and there's all these people. And, like, I was supposed to have all these speakers lined up and, you know, making excuses. They fell off, whatever. And so the yoga teacher is like, all right, I'll do it, but I can't fill a 2-hour segment. So, like, I'm going to bring James, the owner, here. And then, like, together we'll get you through it. She bails on me day of. Which, like, I don't blame Anna to any degree. She's a school teacher. And she's like, James, I am buried. I cannot leave the school. So I, like, have to go speak to save this person that did not do their job very well. But they're friends of a friend, so I'll do it. But where I'm getting to with this story is when I go in, the lady comes out and she's kind of freaking out because everyone's in the conference room of the Brighton Hotel right over here. And she's like, listen, like, it's got to be at least an hour, you know, but, you know, you can talk about food and then you can talk about health and you can talk about. And, like, I can see her nervousness, and I'm, like, as calm as can be. You know what I mean? Because I'm in alignment, bro. I'm not worried about anything. You can put me anywhere. Same with you. You can put us anywhere. We're going to crush it, okay? So she's like, you know, are you good with that? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And I can tell and right when I go into the room, I go, raise your hand in here if you don't know that McDonald's is not the right choice and that you should be cooking a meal at home. And they, like, start laughing. And I go, like, now raise your hand in here if you eat healthy. Like, 2 of them raise their and I'm like, you're not missing information. Most of you people that are struggling, you are not missing information. And if you were, guess what? That little device, I'm like, put it on the table. The device that's in your pocket, it has all of the information for free right now. You could research anything you want. You could find any exercise that Tyler's going to teach you. You could find any jiu-jitsu move I'm going to show you. You could find any recipe that you're looking for. Why do you need us? You need us because you have not learned how to be accountable by yourself. You haven't learned how to be self-disciplined. You haven't, and it went into a whole spiel of exactly what we're speaking about. And by the end, these people are like clapping, like blown away. That is what our society is missing. We are missing self-discipline. We are missing real leadership that can take a spark that maybe someone doesn't even know they have and create a fire out of it. That is what we're missing. We are not paid because of the exercise. We are paid because of the environment, the energy, the mirror of potential to the human being that walks in the door. And, like, that's what not enough people, you know what is a great thing to realize from this point is that's why almost anyone on this earth could be a client, is because, listen, greatness is in there, man. Almost no matter what state you're in, I don't care if you're 65 years old and you've never trained a day in your life, we will somehow bring out a better version in you. I guarantee you, go see Tyler in his programs, you come and see me, I guarantee you, you will be on a track to a better version. That's what the world is missing. So if we can teach the next generation that, like, yo, you know all that power you're searching for? You know all that happiness you're trying to find? You know all that potential you're pursuing? It's you. And it's the way you view yourself. We'll change the world.
Yeah, I mean, even just a byproduct, like a little bit of momentum goes a long way, right? So we use the spark, the flame. I love that you just said that, man, because we use it often inside of the industry. It's like, I don't care if someone comes in because they want to lose 20 pounds in 10 days. Of course, that's not going to happen. Whatever, we can talk through philosophy, whatever, in a minute. But you come in, tell us your real thing, because you have a spark there. Like, our job is to turn that into a long-term flame through momentum, right? As much as, like, we have an effect with our communities as well. I think it's just a byproduct of being surrounded with a bunch of people that are on their chase as well, right?
And that's another thing, guys. Motivation fades. Quick sparks will die out. Have a spark in a room of darkness that is not having a source to keep it burning, it will be extinguished. You have to take that spark. And when you feel that feeling in your life and you know there's better on the other side of a door, you know there's a version of you that should exist. You felt the spark. You have to do something with it, because almost all human beings, very few are not like this, are controlled by the way they feel. It's our limbic system. People are driven by the way that they feel. So when you get that tiny little spark and something in your head says, I should have joined True Fit 3 years ago, or I should have walked in the doors of SFS and, the Michigan Institute of Athletics 3 years ago, get up and do it. Because that spark can become a flame. There can be new habits, new lifestyle, a new version of you. And that is a version that you deserve, but so do your children, so does your family. Because when you change yourself, you change, back to that conversation, every single thing you interact with. The top quote on my Facebook profile that's been there for 12 years since I made a Facebook, because I was like, about me. What is what am I going to put? It says, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own personal transformation.
Let's go, man.
I live by that, man. If you become your absolute best, every single person that interacts with you is going to be better. If I become my best, they're going to be better. So then the people at home or the people that are listening to this, that, a lot of people look up to me as like, oh, this is inspirational. They'll look up to you. Oh, they're so inspirational. You're the same. We are human beings that have set out on a course, and we've paid our dues, and we've gotten knocked down, and we've said it is worth fighting for. And if you do the exact same thing, couple years from now, or however the time is, you're going to be sitting across from someone else going, there's a spark in you. And if you pursue that spark, it might turn into a flame.
No doubt, man. That's good stuff.
So we've been going, by the way, for an hour and almost 15 minutes. And you and I talked about 30 minutes before the podcast. But I want to make sure I capture this because I think this is super important. What are the things now that you found alignment? You understand the difference between the Tyler chasing cars or the next thing and the Tyler that is able to self-reflect and find purpose and find alignment. What are the things that keep you on that? And then, how are you holding yourself accountable to that because you know how important it is now? And what are your big picture goals now? Because over time, goals always change. Yeah. What really are you searching for or wanting to create in this life?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is, we said it too many times with alignment. For me, I know my red flags of what happens when I'm starting to get out of my power, right? And anybody that's followed my fitness journey, it's been kind of a roller coaster, just from, you can tell through dark periods and coming back up and those types of things. So now it's getting better about knowing when I'm doing things that don't point to my core values, when I'm not in my power, right? So what it actually does is makes it a lot easier for me to say no to a lot of things, because I've always been a people pleaser, right? Saying no to a lot of things, but also saying yes to things because I know they align and I know the energy that I can put behind it, right? So, people look at you, they're like, James, how do you do all the things you do? How are you going like that all the time? And we kind of jammed on it before we started. It's the kind of energy and euphoria that comes from living in your purpose and being excited about it. It's not work at that point, right? It feels like work if it doesn't line up with your core values, right? So alignment there, and my favorite quote is, I'm not going to complain about how much I have on my plate. I said I wanted to eat, but do I have enough things on my plate that fill me back up? And when you're doing things directly with your alignment and core values, it's I can go all day. We need to Energize Bunny, right? You know that. You can relate to that. But big learning period is just you have to spend the time doing that. When I can back relationally and so forth, I didn't know who the heck I was for so long. So when it comes to relationships, of course they're going to fall apart. I don't even know I want to be loved, let alone someone else. They don't even know who I am, that kind of thing. So it starts there. I think I kind of missed some of your second question, but
the second question was just, now that you're finding these things and you're finding purpose and you're finding happiness, how do you recreate goals? Because there's a different Tyler that exists in this moment.
Yep.
You now look at life different. You look at yourself different. You look at all these things different. Dan, UFC, call me back in a minute. So you look at everything different. Yep. So does that change the goals? Does that just make them more powerful? Does it add drive? What would you say if you do have a 5-year plan now? Because you laughed about it before. I ain't got no 5-year plan. I'm just running by the seat of my pants. What does that look like? When I sit down and talk with you and 5 years later and we're killing it even further, what are you hoping to be at?
Yeah, I have a responsibility, but more so it's not a responsibility anymore. It's excitement behind, I talked about that period right through the pandemic before I got alignment with my team and all that. It felt really heavy and a lot of work. It felt overwhelming. since spending all that time and really structuring out and going back to the drawing board, eliminating some relationships that shouldn't be there, I'm so excited about our movement and growth. We have a pretty big growth plan this year, but also growing the right way. So it's much easier for me to be like, hey, it's not a good fit, right? It could be a phenomenal person, probably going to crush it with their gym, whatever they choose to do, no matter what, but growing slow the right way.
I understand that 1,000%. And being able to say no and being able to set healthy boundaries is so difficult if you are an entrepreneur that cares about people and cares about projects and passion, because you never want to disappoint anyone. But what you don't find out is you're actually disappointing yourself. As soon as you're not saying no, when the real answer deep down should be no, you are disappointing yourself. Do that enough and you're going to go on a path you're not proud of. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to name any names, but like, I've had to let some people go from here that were ultra successful, but they've gotten so far out of alignment for what has to exist in this building for us to go the direction that we're going to influence the lives of so many and children and people. And like, I want to be that mirror, man. I want every one of my people to be that mirror for people searching for potential. And you know what? You know it's right when you feel okay after.
Yep.
Because you can like love someone, care about them, want to see their success, and you know what? Feel like
at peace.
Hey, thank God. Yep. It sounds derogatory, but like they just had to go. Yeah. You know what I'm saying very clearly.
Yeah.
But that's a weird thing, because as people pleasers and as someone that like, if we had infinite hours in the day and we could affect somebody's life every single hour of the day, we would do it. But at a certain point, you will spread yourself so thin that you're going to be a fraction of the person that you're meant to be.
Yeah.
So, man, Tyler, this has been truly an honor to sit with you today. I'm going to tell you a funny story really quick. So I heard about you first. I think it was because of MMA. I don't even know what it was, but it's probably about 10 years ago. Some kid that I was friends with at the time that, like, we grew apart because I realized, like, we're just not in alignment at all as human beings. He had told me, oh, yeah, that kid's an asshole, and he spoke super poorly of you. And over a long period of time, I judged you by that as a younger kid, because he was kind of like, oh, he's a fake fighter, he's this, and he's just it was I won't go much into it, but I, as a young man, was like, my friend must know what he's talking about. And so what happens is you create a narrative in your mind of who someone is that you don't know anything about. And as you're older,
right.
I'm probably 23 at the time.
Right.
When you're much older, you reflect and you're like, that's very stupid of me. But in my mind, I had created a story of who Tyler was. And I feel like, because we had seen each other a couple times over the years, and I always kind of like had a little bit of brush you off energy. And I'm saying this to you now because I've actually regretted that to this day, because now I see a lot of parallels between you and I. Yeah. When we talked again, and when I saw you getting on the path of like, I'm going to be a good human being and affect things positively. Not like I'm going to make money, I'm going to be greedy, I'm going to just all me. When I saw at a distance, this man is going through serious personal growth. I was like, that only good human beings do that. Because if you don't have good core values, or you're not a good person down to your soul, you can't align to it because it's not there, right? Yeah. Like, if you're going to be a corrupt, evil motherfucker that greed is over everything, you can't just become a good human being. You can put on a mask. You can play a role. You can have a facade that says, I'm a great human being. But, like, you'll never really find that. So I judged you very unfairly, and, like, that's a regret I have. And I've had that over a lot of relationships over my life, because I'm like, when you don't know a human being, to pass judgment on them is like one of the silliest things you can do. You don't know their background. You don't know what they've been through. And you don't know at what stage in their life they were at. If you met me at 17 years of age, I would probably be hostile, angry, ready to fight, don't care about anything, death wish. Like, I used to ride my crotch rocket down the highway, stand on my seat, let go of the steering wheel, like, did that in front of Brian one time, passed him at like 100 miles an hour on the highway. No, like, just stand on the seat. That's a story he could tell you.
Let's go.
And he's like, you're a maniac.
Yeah.
But if you knew that James Gray, you would have a completely different perception of who I was. And in that time, that's you're like, oh, well, that must be him. So, like, to sit with you today and have this deep dialogue with another dream chaser that is trying to affect the world positively, it was an honor, man.
Yeah, mutual. On that note, I can't let it go out with it, man. I don't remember how long ago it was that Bojo invited me down in the basement one time when we were still training back in the day. Yeah, one time.
At my house?
Yeah, in Fowlerville. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it was crazy, long time ago.
It must have been just one time because I don't remember.
It was just one time. Yeah, I came out with Wojo, and I don't even know if you were even down there the whole time. It might have been just a couple of us in the basement. But just mutual respect, man. All love and gratitude for having me on here. And, even though there's, whatever that was, probably was true, man. I used to be an asshole. So who knows? Your friend might have been wrong. I can take responsibility for that for sure. But it's been really special to, pop in here, whatever it was a couple years ago, to check out your growth here. And obviously I'm a customer here as well, training. It's a
I was gonna
phenomenal
say,
environment. It's been cool to come full circle for sure.
Are we going to reveal on the podcast that not only are you training, you're training with one of my UFC athletes, and we're talking about putting you in the ring? We're not. I don't know if that's still the goal.
Yeah.
But you had said to me recently, hey, I'm kind of thinking about doing a fight again. And that was like, yeah, because you don't need to. You're successful. You have money. You're an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But there's still some fire there. You know what I mean? And that kind of got me fired up. So is that something that you're still planning? Or are you kind of taking it day by day and see how it goes? Like, where are you at with that? That's how we'll wrap up the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Just kudos on what you guys do here. We're just fitness. You guys are professional, dialed in, like phenomenal martial artists. And for me, this style of training has always been so much fun. It makes you want to be flexible. It makes your endurance want to go through. If you got to be strong, all those types of things. So it's been a blast getting back here and training. I want to stay consistent. I have an ultra marathon planned in September. So that's kind of the goal, but I want to continue training through that. But I've always wanted to kind of take another one in there, not because I want to give a run at it. I'm old, but more so the respect that goes behind the preparation that becomes it. Like I want to go through that process again of getting prepped up to do it the right way and fight and those types of things. So probably by the end of this year, I'd like to get one on the books for sure.
It'd be pretty sick, man. I'm going to say this right on the podcast. Imagine we have you under the SFS banner alongside True Fit, and it's literally you're representing Scorpion Fighting Systems and True Fit going into that cage, me and Parisian in your corner, and you know what I mean? And you worked up to that. That's a powerful moment. You know what I mean? So super exciting. Again, thanks for joining with me today, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.